In a lot of ways, I guess you'd see there's influences from my watercolors to my collages, but there's some ways, you know, you could see that maybe not know that I did it. I mean, there's just a different feel to it. And I did, Joseph did a lot of waterlies and fish. I don't think he ever did a, you know, like a shrimp, especially one that's 20 by 30. It looks even really large here. But, and one of them, I think, I did two different versions of it. You can tell I like to do versions because I always feel like it can be done a different way. And the Blunt collection in Montgomery, they have that in their permanent collection. Piece, we're talking about 11, maybe 11 by 14. The very bottom, you can see sort of a strip that runs. It kind of runs very, almost like a border, but it doesn't go all the way across. That's actually collage. I did about 4 or 5 pieces when I first started, when I made the transition from watercolors to collage, but I realized pretty quickly you just couldn't work on watercolor paper as well, you know, because it's got more of a texture to it. You need something really flat to be able to work on for the collages. So this was one of the few that I did that actually has a little collage element in my watercolor. And once again, the Japanese influence, a little bit of the way that I did the type. I would go on restless for, and I didn't have this in the talk, but I think it's good to point in. I went restless a little bit for the watercolors, not feeling like I was growing as an artist. I was still doing good work, but I wasn't at the point where I was when I did Sunlight on Sabbath. I was kind of moving more smaller pieces at that time. And so when I did that, I did a lot of pen and inks, which is going back almost to the illustration. And a lot of them were Japanese oriented. And it was a nice pace. And so my wife Patsy went to Hawaii. I didn't go, I don't like to fly. It's a longbow trip. And so Patsy went to Hawaii with her family, and when she came back, she brought me some books. She brought tons of photographs she'd taken for me to do watercolors, but she brought a book that was like a Chinese temple. And so I had a really bad week and a very bad day. A lot of things that happened that were not in favor of me wanting to continue. It was just hard to make a living. It was just, I went 3 months without selling Zip. So you can imagine, think, well, you know, eventually you have to make a few dollars as much as you love to do this stuff. And so that particular day, there was a thing that was Houston, something fell through in Houston, something fell through at Gerald's. And I just ripped a page out of one of the books that Patsy had brought me. It was Chinese Temple. And I started painting on it. And I said, wow, I have a feel for this. I naturally knew I had a feel for collage the first time to paint on it. It was just one page now. We're not talking about pieces, you know, number of pieces on it. Then I did another one. I had a watercolor show coming up in Charlotte. And so I said, you know, gosh, I'm gonna do about 10 or 12 of these and just see if the gallery likes it. Well, they loved it. We forgot the watercolor show, and that started my collaging. And so it's kind of nice sometimes when things don't go your way or things are a struggle. And it forced me to try something new that worked. You know, it didn't always have to work. Okay, this one is this was jumping into my watercolors. This is a 5 by 6 foot watercolor. And Ray and Kate Jones, right here, they actually, when they were building their house at Kiowa, they positioned those walls. So I got the thrill of someone actually, you know, making their particular den might have influence on the space, and that didn't usually happen. And so it really fit well in there, and it was you know, when you get a piece as big as that, it's the biggest watercolor I'll ever do. 5 by 6 feet, it took a long time. It was under roll, in other words, it was rolled up part of the time while I'm working on it because my drawing table wasn't that big. And then I'd unravel it, you know, a little bit further and there was more like when you did the watercolors for me, it was more like you did a section at a time, so it was just kind of growing. It wasn't like I did a massive section and went back. It was more of sort of like a spider web that would kind of build its way out. And it was Aloes, and the Aloes, my wife and I went to Riddle School of Art, and that's in I guess it's Maurice Selby Gardens in Sarasota, and that's where the the aloes came from. And then I like the background, really popped it out. And I thought it was, it's hard to photograph work, and even in the museum, it's hard to photograph with the lighting, but I thought it turned out pretty good to kind of see that space of 5 by 6 feet. Now the largest collage I've ever done near Greenville, South Carolina, and that's where I painted it. And then after I painted it, I knew that some of these pieces, my car isn't big enough to get it in the car, so I had to take the section that I'd done in half, and then I had to go back in the framer, and I had to piece those sections back on top of it to make it all work. It was a wonderful challenge, and you see the finger here. I have also a little tiny, as we all get older, little issues with health, and I had tendonitis, and I've always had tendonitis. I even have an ultrasound machine to be able to keep my hands going. And during that time, I had Louis Sajon, a doctor, would work on me every other day because it was about 4 months I really struggled. And so when I was doing this, I was healthy, but I was working my hands so much that I would go to his office the next day after I'd worked on it because my hands were just so weak, especially my good right hand. But my tendonitis always starts in my left. My mom knew when I switched over. But that piece is, I hope y'all saw it here. It's really nice in size. Let's go to. Okay, then I've done collages for a number of years, and I said, once again, I must be a little restless about trying to do new things. And I said, I'll try these painted drawings. So I take and I'll slowly, let me get this started. When I did these, I did like scissors, corkscrews, different things. And Molly over here showed some of those years ago. And it was kind of a nice way. So what I would take is I'd paint the actual corkscrew or paint whatever else, scissors, and then I would stamp it down and then start painting on top while I was trying to dry. So you have to do it really quickly. And it had a nice little flair to it, a way to kind of get back to painting a little differently again. And so for my show back in 22 years ago at the Morris Museum, they gave me 2 umbrellas. And I noticed when the gift shop today, I said, do y'all still have these? They said, no, we hadn't seen one of those. Well, the 2 turned into just one that's left. So I said, you know what I'll do? I'll try and see if I could do an umbrella. And the thing about the umbrella, it dries really fast and it's really big. And Patsy and I did 2 of them that size. And I used collage on this one. The other one I did was really more a straight print off the umbrella and then painted back in it. And I just really liked the way, and I used the kind of world map parts, and once again bubbles. That was back in the days that I really haven't started doing bubbles as much as I do now. And it was called Raindrops. And I brought my umbrella back. I don't think they're going to give me a new umbrella, but I am missing one because I'm not going to paint on this one. And Katrina and Frank, wonderful collectors. They got this piece when I first sent the images out to collectors. I'm really good at keeping up with collectors. They, fortunately love my work. Probably say, oh, he's sending more images. And but I love the connection. I always have. It's in my DNA. And so this piece here was a good transition to kind of show when I did the watercolors and now the collage, because that has that even though it's very thick, it has that feel of those natural pieces I did. Almost all the watercolors were, I did a few bridges, but most of it was all gardens or flowers and fish and some birds. And on this one, I don't know if y'all saw the movie, The Woman in Gold. It was out a number of years ago. At the very beginning of it, Klimt, they show someone portraying Klimt to take the gold, and then he takes it and he stamps it on there. There's a lot of gold in his work. And so when I saw that, Patsy and I were at the theater, and I came back and I said, I don't think we have any gold hanging out in our house, that I can do it with, but we have aluminum foil. And so And I got the best riddle wrap. So this one has a little bit, which you haven't seen yet, the piece, because you saw it, you wouldn't recognize it in the image, but you can sort of see the silver through that straight line down, and then there's some little sections in there. It was very hard to wax down, it was very hard to paint on, but it gave another surface. And I really believe in trying to do something that makes a new statement or different surface to it. This one is Moonlight, and I can't, sometimes, I know it's hard to believe when I'll say this, but I would probably do those particular things 100 different times on my iPad. Layering, trying to get different colors. There's actually, sometimes you'll actually see a little bit of a cityscape actually in it, which has nothing to do with the city skyline behind it. So I'm trying to find something that has a glow. And not all of them, you just don't know when that magic's gonna hit when you're doing it this way, but this one, there's almost a glow. If you can see the original, which y'all will in a few minutes. The glowiness of it, I thought, well, maybe I'll do a skyline. I hardly ever do cityscapes, especially at night. And so it was kind of nice, and of course I got carried with all the windows and the detail. I mean, it took count. If I was paid by the hour, I'd actually be fairly rich. but as I was doing it, it just, all that kind of added to the mystery of it. Then I pulled in the koi fish and once again, more bubbles coming into it. And then I said, well, it'd be kind of nice to add another element to it. I'll add these 3 moons. And of course, it helped me title it. And I've titled a lot of pieces, so it's kind of nice when sometimes you get something that's the perfect title for it. And then those were actually lily pads above that, sort of superimposed behind it. And then to paint back in it, you learn different steps. I used to, like I said, I painted with Q-tips, and these have a lot of splattering in it. And that way, it just gives it a different kind of, freshness to the work. And then doing the reflections off there, and you'll see the birds within the borders. I'm big on borders. Borders just give another outlook and kind of, in a way, sort of gives reference to the piece itself. So you have these little birds coming across here. You have, once again, those banners that I showed you in the Japanese rose. You can sort of see those, coming through on both the top and the bottom. And anyway, it was one of those pieces where it was a surprise. I did not expect the glow to come out like it did. Lily. And my granddaughter back there, Peyton Day, we were in the garden together with the other granddaughter also. And I'm photographing away, and it's good to get them that experience, because Arlen, our son, had that experience, because all those watercolors were done from gardens we went to all the time. He really loved botanical gardens. And so we went out and I photographed, and we both kind of looked at this, and we thought, well, this will be a nice lily. Of course, I distorted it a lot. And so the red spots around it were just kind of like, I thought it was kind of a dance feeling. So I thought, well, Peyton's dancing lilies. And there's actually, I don't know if you can tell or not, but there's it's hard to point it, but this little shape here is actually a vase from another collage that when I was collaging, I said maybe that'd be kind of nice to sort of give it that vertical look. And then that's the way I sort of made a perspective with the red spots. It almost kind of goes back, and I thought that was a nice feel. And then the black kind of held it together. And that was a nice, it's like that's more of a square piece, a 20 by 20. And I thought it was a nice look, trying to pull that off and break up the space with the black lines running through it. I would say over, from 88, which is when I started the collaging, probably the first maybe 70, 80 of those pieces had no interiors. And so when I wanted to kind of spotlight to go to the next one, and so when I started interiors, I realized there was a lot of directions I could go, you could change up a lot of things, and I love change, as you can tell. And so this one is named after my other granddaughter, Madison Day. And when she was real young, I'll back up a minute. So when I found this space where you have a bamboo staircase coming down, is what I built it from. I added more bamboo, made the steps a little different and stretching out more. And then there was like an Andy Warhol here, which is now an abstract, and then Rauschenberg, which is my version of Rauschenberg pieced together in there. And so that space is what I built it from. And then I found the Chrysler towers. And that was nice to have it located to kind of give you perspective this way. Well, a lot of the works that I do, somebody say, how long did it take? Well, I could say 2 years sometimes. Not because I work on it for 2 years, but I'm filing things away. Like I knew when I had this space, I needed a lot of interior things to work from. And so as I'm filing it, I came across this little bitty blue push cord. And I remember my experience when Madison was very young, and she had a little push cord, and we'd push her around in the blocks and stuff. And I said, well, maybe I can roll that with a collage it. I rolled it under that dining room table, which I found, and put it in the piece. And so it made sense, a room for Madison, even though she's 13 now, and this piece is, since I pushed her in a little cart. But the space that has, I love when you can go exterior, out, interior. And I always, because magazines are my lifeline, magazines and books, and then my own photography. So I usually try to put books and magazines within the pieces, like interiors a lot of times, because it gives reference to what, makes the start of one of my pieces in a lot of cases. Trying to think, the chandeliers, I must have had 8 to 10 chandeliers up there, and that one's the one that I finally decided on. It was just different and worked. The bamboo was really interesting to pull off. It had all that light coming through it. And then you always have a missing link, I call it, that you do the piece, but you just, one piece, you just know, in this little vase here, this big vase that comes up, I needed something there to break up the space. Very challenging. I can't tell you, books, I'll go through like 80 books, and plus my files to find things. Now this was an extreme case, but I'm like an archaeological dig, I'm trying my best to find just that right thing. If it takes 3 hours to do 3 inches, that's okay. It's never about time for me. It's all about the quality and the energy and the passion that goes into it. And this is one of those pieces that just, and a lot of them, it just takes time to find just the right things. Okay, this one is called Dining in Paris. And I started off with a room which did not have a dining room. It had the view of Paris and the skyline. And you could kind of, I think the little tripod that you can kind of see there, like with a telescope on it, is sitting there. Everything else changed around, staircases. Well, this piece, you can tell, I love staircases. When I can find just the right one. Sometimes the architects see my work, that won't stand. It doesn't matter. This is flat. Don't worry about it. It's dreamlike. That's who I am. I can't build things, but I can do collages. I can build on flat board. And so the dining room table is a nice touch. It kind of ran you out the window. And this piece, I don't know if y'all are familiar, but the phrase photorealism was coined by Louis Mizell. And Louis Mizell and his wife, Susan, came down to Sarasota, and I was in a show there. And they wanted to buy a particular piece that I wouldn't let go of, which was good because they made them go out to my studio. And so Patsy and I invited them out the next day. We're cleaning the house, trying to get everything. We have a New York gallery, come to the studio. And so they bought 3 small pieces. Well, a couple of them were large, but one was fairly small. And they gave me a show not long from that with Bernadoucci Mizell. Bernadoucci did not like me. Louis did. So there was a conflict there, but they gave me a show. And so, and Bernadoucci's out of business, so Louis is still hanging on. But my work was not a great fit because it's mostly photorealism, even though mine's got a lot of photography in it, but it's not photorealism. And so this particular piece is in their dining room. They got one more during the show. And so it had, I was going to say this is a good time to bring it up. Collectors are so nice to bring their work, my work. They sit in nice places, they have, they find a way to make it fit. I had one of the pieces today, in the last couple of weeks that bought a piece. Says, I have no idea where it's gonna go, but I gotta have it. That's awesome, because that means the work speaks to them. They get what I do. I've had people many times came down to Sarasota to look at, there were friends of ours who had no art background. We had a beautiful 18th floor view over the bay of Sarasota into Longboat Key. And they would go right past the art and look at that view, which was more spectacular than anything as far as the art maybe to them, but they didn't get it. But when people get it, and maybe explaining it in a lot of ways makes, kind of gives you a dialogue to get to what the work's all about. Let me now turn the page. The Global Embassy, that piece was done, really, even though our show is 2002 to 2022, it's really towards the end of, like 1999 or something like that. And back in those days, I did a lot of, I probably did about 10 or 12 pieces that were about this interiors that large, about 17 by 42. I don't do them that large anymore. It's not that I don't want to, it's just physically kind of hard, and really finding the right material has become more difficult in books. A lot of things online. You don't find for me, I find great things, but I don't find as many things. It took a massive amount of books to pull this piece off. And when I did it, I was supposed to bring it to Charlotte. It was a collector that was waiting to see it and waiting to see another piece. And I had about 4 days to get it there. And I had everything ready, and my mother-in-law, we lived next door to him, comes over and says, Arless, I have to have it. She says, I love it. She has tears coming down her eyes. And I love my mother-in-law. She's passed away now, but she was wonderful, loved my work. And Patsy, I said, Patsy, she has to have this. I said, they're expecting this in like 4 days. And so this piece stayed on the same street. I did one in 4 days about the same scale. He never knew. There was like references to Michael Jordan in the other piece in this little fine border. So there were some things that he kind of knew that I could make work in the new one I did, which was just about as good. And so anyway, that one just leads you back. I mean, it's just in the global, it just gave a nice touch to how you could take a piece and give you all these angles off of it. And I like, sometimes this part, the side leading you into a collage, you would think that would not be the hardest, but to find the right scale to make the eye work, this was a hard thing to find. I looked at many things that I placed in there that are probably still sitting in some file somewhere that never worked. The globe was a nice touch, and then I was able to incorporate my own little abstracts in those photographs those kind of frames you see on the your far left side. But when I got it from my mother-in-law, it was in a very poor suggestion. When she died, we got the piece. And so for 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years, it just sat in our closet. I had it up a couple times. The frame just distracted from the piece, so I just couldn't do it. Pat says, let's have it up. And eventually I said, well, let's put it away and maybe think about framing it down the road. Well, this show is coming up, and I said, well, it's a great opportunity to frame it up in a nicer frame. And when we did, it really, so I could tell the difference. And so when I was doing it, I noticed I didn't, and you can tell if you look at the original out there, this little section here, I went ahead and collaged. So it's done in 1999 to 2022. So I took that little part out. I felt like I could do something a little bit more. I did it at the framer and waxed it down there and had a little paint and made it work. I didn't have to bring brushes. I had my finger. Makes sense that you can walk through these with your eyes. The painting part that I love, you'd think the whole piece would be my favorite part. There's a little bitty shadow off that 5-legged bench that I made. It was a combination of the same bench with a couple extra little legs in it. And I just took my finger and just painted that little shadow across there. And it just worked. It's just so nice when that touch works off, you never have to touch it again because you want it fresh as you can. And trying to think of anything else. Once again, fairly simple border except the little pattern which is off the back of one of I think, the auction catalogs. I had a collector, they're not here, but they've been wonderful collectors, and they gave me about 10 to 12 years of Christie catalogs and auction catalogs. So I had all those covers and all those things to cut apart, and that was all from one of the catalogs that was given. Let me see if I go back a space. Okay, now that is the last image, and there'll be some question and answers if we have time. I'm not sure how much time we have left, but I really appreciate y'all being here. I mean, y'all so kind to show up. Like I say, a lot of people try to get here, but the tanker truck situation really prevented. There was couple collectors made it through before it got worse, I guess. And you know, it's an honor to show in this museum. It's a wonderful museum. We took the time yesterday to walk through the permanent collection up there. Beautiful work. But and once again, thanks to the museum staff.